Well, hello and hi there. My name is Alex Vidalis, and you're listening to the Pile of Waves podcast. The Pile of Waves podcast is a show about artistry, about technology, about community, about commerce. It's about the intersections of these worlds in our lives. We ask that artists and musicians, creative minds of all kinds, we ask for them to come on our show and tell their personal stories of success and tribulation, because it further embeds us and the community with their success. And our success is now further embedded within them. This we do believe. Not only do we believe it, you, by listening to this show, are showing us that you believe it too. I wanted to get a few thank yous right out of the way. Not out of the way, because it's not a burden. I wanted to just thank some people. Don Zientara allowed us to conduct this interview at his studio, which is a marvelous gift. Thank you very much for your continued support, Don. I wanted to thank, of course, the interview subject, John Masters of Harness Flux, for coming on our show and telling his story and sharing with us his opinions and his musings on all sorts of things, including whether or not vinyl is the better way to listen to music, how to get over your anxiety when you perform, the awesomeness of house shows and how they've sort of taken off in the DC area. Not that they ever went away, but there seem to be more and more house shows. And what it's like to try to sell your music, the whole concept of selling out and whether or not that's actually still even a term that people use or even understand. I mean, I don't know if it even really matters. I also wanted to thank Misha Communications, Michelle over at Misha Communications, for her promotional and marketing efforts, as well as her managing of our social media. You've done a great job. Thank you so much for the support. We would not be this far without you. If any of you out there in the podcast world are interested in someone helping you with your social media and your marketing, you should definitely reach out to Misha Communications. Without any further ado, let's get to this interview with John Masters of Harness Flux on the Pile of Waves podcast.
I'm John Masters from Harness Flux, of Harness Flux.
And so today was a very exciting day. City Paper wrote an article about you. Would you tell us a little bit about the release that they wrote about?
Mm-hmm. It's called the Collected Singles. It's a remastered compilation and EP of all the last few songs I've been doing over the last 2 or 3 years, which were all, like I was saying, all released kind of each on a different blog or whatnot. And then now those are all compiled together and redone and remastered, especially because I learned a lot about figuring out how to record these things in the last year or two. So really kind of punch them up and get it sound better than I initially. It started out really kind of primitively with I was just using one microphone and singing just guitar and vocals, and now I'm layering a lot of stuff over top and making it a lot more kind of the sound a lot more rich and things. So, and I felt like, these songs I want more people to hear them, and I just kind of punched them up and stuff. So, and I like the concept of singles all together on a compilation, kind of, so you can go through the trajectory of the way those songs were written and how they were all put together. So.
Tell me a little bit about how the songs were written, not utilitarian aspect, but, give me a little bit of insight into the inspiration, when you're creating music and when you're writing music. How does it, come out of you? Is it start with an emotion? Does it start with an event?
A lot of times it doesn't sound so exciting to say it this way, but when I actually have a show to play, then I would, if I have an actual thing that I have to do, that'll get me motivated to get something together, and so if a show is coming up and I'll be like, well, I kind of want to flesh out the set list, and I'll be like, well, why don't I try and write something new this time, and I feel like just for some reason that's just my best motivation, is to book something, a show, or get, and then say, or maybe say it's been a few months since I've really sat down with something, and that's really how it flows out. It's just be like, oh, well, just a couple weeks before the show, let's just pick up the guitar and see what comes out, and then then test it the next show, and then if
so the podcast we were talking earlier, it's about artistry, technology, community, commerce. Let's do a little word association. When I say artistry, what actually comes to mind for you as a performer when I say artistry? And you don't have to limit yourself to one word.
Okay. Artistry, I mean, I guess that just runs the gamut of anyone that's being creative and making something making something for themselves, for whether or not it's music or art or film or anything. That's what I think about.
Does it require an audience?
Not necessarily. Depends on what you want to do with it. There's been plenty of painters and artists and that have done amazing things that no one's ever seen. So I mean, I think if you're confident enough, if you should get it out there and people should see it, but it doesn't necessarily mean you have to.
Sure.
Some of the best music I've heard is never necessarily someone who can go out and play live a lot.
Are you hiding songs from us? Are you hiding songs right now?
Oh, no. But I feel like that's especially in the music industry. I mean, it's a tough thing to you have to be able to write all these songs and get them out there, but then you also have to be able to perform them in front of everyone. And I think that's kind of a double. If you think about other things, like if you were actor or if you're a stand-up comedian or whatnot, you do one thing essentially. You're a stand-up comedian, you go out and you got to write all that stuff, but you do it in front of people, and that's like the main thing. But writing music has got multiple aspects to it, as far as you got to write all the songs, you got to get them out there, then you also have to be able to perform them and make people excited about them in that way too. And sometimes that's not necessarily the most fair thing. Not everyone I know has been able to handle that. I've had in bands over the years that I couldn't. I really very much tried to get people to play along with me and be in bands with me that just were never going to be able to handle that very well. Playing out live too much and touring, especially, really having to get yourself out there. It's not always an easy thing to do.
I'm going to throw another word at you: technology.
As of late, like we said earlier, things like just all the social media and cell phones and everything that we've got, and the drastic change in the way music is now presented to people based on things like GarageBand and computers and whatnot. I mean, we used to put out whole records and play tons of shows and do everything and never touch a computer, back in the day with some of my earlier bands. And then maybe a computer was, maybe we'd use like Pro Tools once or something, right. But now it's like you touch the computer first.
I know.
It's like, it's just odd to me that I don't want to sound too old by saying that, because I love technology, I love using it all, but kids on SoundCloud and things are thinking first and foremost, like, how do I get all this technical know-how first and get all this stuff together? Then they maybe think about the music next, which is odd to me. I think about the music first. I feel like I just feel like that's a good golden rule for everyone. No matter how you're going to get it out there, try and just think about the music first, then worry about how it's presented. So,
totally. Community.
Community, it's especially important and always has been in DC, because it's a small town, and it's not historically a town that is a music town. So. But it has been put on the map by a lot of different music people. I mean, some of the best records that ever made in this town have been made right here, in Inner Ear, but it's a very conservative place. It's hard to win people over. So community is very important as far as DC is concerned, because if you don't, that's how we're all helping each other out. I mean, I'm still playing shows with people that I've known for like 15 or 20 years, which is just awesome. I mean, that's in a certain way I could be like, well, I'll just take a break for a couple years and then come back and give my old friends a ring, be like, oh, I'm playing again. And all of a sudden we'd have shows, and that's a really important thing. I don't take that for granted. So being able to have that community of people that are helping each other out, that are really into each other's music and stuff. So.
Nice Breeze. Did you listen to their interview? I won't be hurt. My feelings won't be hurt.
I've heard a little bit of it. Yeah.
They talked very, very much about the strong community, and it was interesting, because at the time that I met them, that was actually one of the interviews I didn't do, which was weird. There's only maybe one or two last year I didn't do. And, I came in when I first started doing the podcast, to make it about me for a second. My opinion was DC was not a great music town, and that more information needed to be out there so people knew where it was. But what I was running into more and more was there were very deep pockets of community within the DC scene, and that those communities were very reliant upon each other, and they were not very concerned about money. And that takes me to my next word association, which is commerce.
Commerce. Yeah, I mean, I just don't really think about that much too often when it comes to music. I mean, I'm in the fortunate position of not ever having to worry too much. I mean, I'm not ever interested in the money necessarily. I mean, if I'm gonna try to play a show or something, I expect to be compensated in some way. But I'm not too worried about, in the long run, if I spend every dime that I had doing this, and that's money well spent as far as I'm concerned. I'm not. I would never be interested in if money comes along with it, great, I'll take it, but it's not a huge deal to me about how much money is made. And I've over the years I've had all sorts of different going in and out of like monetary things with music. Like I was offered to sell a song to a commercial at some point for my old band Metropolitan and things like that, and I've had grants given to me, and I've had all sorts of different ways of sort of earning money. It's a ways. That's what you got to do to be a musician, is try and sneak out some money out of things you don't even know where it can come from. You didn't even think about where it might come from, like trying to sell, put your song in a TV show or something like that. And the selling out thing is not, kids don't think about that anymore. I mean, just selling out is the first thing you do. Is as long as you write a song, the first thing you're hoping is it gets purchased by somebody or something. But,
or at the very least, you get a bunch of clicks.
Right.
And clicks means dough. In a certain aspect. It's funny when you say selling out. I wanted to have this recurring bit on the show where I would have funerals for songs when they were used in commercials. So you would declare that song dead, and it would no longer be a song. It would now be a jingle. Uh-huh. And I was telling someone about this, and it was actually Amanda from Heavy Breathing. And she was saying, I don't watch TV, so I don't know any of those songs that you're talking about. And so you have that moment of like, oh shit, so the problem's me. And you're like, oh, okay. But her point is very valid, which is if you look at commercial enterprises, you're going to run into commercial applications, and so ignore it if it bothers you.
Right.
And that's what I took from it. And
placements of music and songs used to mean something. It used to sort of mean like, oh wait, this company is somewhat hip because they use this or something. Right. But now it's just they're just pouncing on the latest thing, whatever they can, and that it doesn't. Those placements don't mean anything anymore to people. They're just like, oh, well, I heard that again. And it used to really upset people for a while. It went from being like, no one does it, don't do it. Then people started doing it, and they were very upset at everyone who did it. And now it's just no one cares. People everybody will sell their song to anyone. So, which is fine. That's probably the way it should be. But I mean, it's just, it used to be, in like music, indie, especially like indie music that was made in the 90s and things. If you heard it in an ad in like the 2000s and you were thinking, well, maybe that company is kind of hip because they bought like this song or whatnot, but actually now it's just all they need is one person that knows knows anything at all about music to place these things. So
I don't even maybe you youngins don't even really understand the concept of what selling out used to mean, but you would hear a song in a commercial and you were like, oh, this guy's sold out. And essentially you were saying they got paid, which I don't know. I mean, maybe that means something or maybe it doesn't. Who cares? Going into this next segment, John's going to talk a little bit about, I mentioned my anxiety about performing in front of people, and he gives some advice on how to get over that, or at least his perspective on it. You're going to hear him talk about his love for vinyl. You're going to hear him, and while we're talking about vinyl, and the lusciousness and sexiness of vinyl, this is a wonderful time to remind you to show the power of the Pilot Waves podcast and support the best band in the DMV. Go to Indiegogo, type in 2 words, Heavy Breathing, put down your cash, get yourself a vinyl copy of the newest Heavy Breathing release, Airtight, and you can also get a copy of their older release, Body Problems, and you can also support the best band in DC, and that's a fact check. I also wanted to take this segment to again thank Don Zientara for letting us use Inner Ear Studios for the interview. And and before I forget, you're also going to hear in the next segment some of the love that John has for the Galaxy Hut and the Black Cat. So that is for you who are employed there, who I know are listening. There are lots of people, and I would actually put myself into this category. I can play the guitar okay, by myself, but if you put me in front of 3 people, I just can't do it. And it's not that I know that repetition and consistency will get me there, but there's, what do you think? Is it, you said it's not like for you, it's not stage fright or anything like that. What advice would you give to people though, who feel that sort of anxiousness about performing in front of people?
I think that it's just the most important thing is getting out there and doing it for yourself. People get too wrapped up in whether or not they're going to come off well, or whether or not the audience is going to like them or whatnot. And that's really actually not the most important thing, is whether or not people accept you or like you. It's more of like, you should just have the confidence to go out there and do it for yourself. And if you don't want to, that's fine. But just don't worry too much about what others are going to think. I mean, some of the best music ever been made is probably because people at the beginning never cared about what other people thought of them. They just went out and did it because that's what they felt. They felt like they had that drive, they had that natural ability to get out and do it. And then if they worried about what everybody said about them, whether or not it was good or bad, they never would have done it in the first place. So, and I feel like that I've met a lot of people that have those kind of anxieties and those kind of fears. And you shouldn't try as much as, and it's not easy, but as much as you can, just don't worry about what other people think.
It's extremely well said. No, I mean, that's right on. It's right into that ego. If you're in it for your ego, you're just if it gets bruised, you're just gonna deflate immediately.
Right.
Talk to me a little bit. So you have the EP, and we were talking a little bit about the timing of the EP, and then I was trying to push you on the idea of crowdsourcing and things like that. Tell me about vinyl. Like, why is vinyl important to you? It seems like that would be something that you would like to do. Why? I mean, and I'm not challenging you, because I have my own reasons why I love vinyl too.
Oh, sure. Oh, well, just vinyl's like the most fun format to have these days, I mean, it looks the coolest, and it feels the coolest, and it feels like you're connecting. I just feel like you connect more with a vinyl now than you do a CD. But I mean, that's the complete opposite of what it was like 10 or 15 years ago, when everybody just had CDs, And then we do singles, we do vinyl singles, but LPs were not as big as they are now. So, but I feel like the LP experience is like really taking home. You go see a show, you see a band, you buy the LP, is really taking home like a chunk of that band. You get the real big artwork, the real thing, and you really have to like focus on, if you put that record on,
right.
You're not just hitting like play on a gigantic playlist, and then forgetting about it, and who knows who might show up, like on iTunes or something. You're actually putting one band down on one thing, and you listen to, and you're focused on that one record. And I think that's why it's so great. I'm actually more of a fan of the 7-inch, because I like things to be quick. Like I mean, LPs are great too, but I like 7-inch because I kind of came up with making singles and making things and trying to just jam on as many songs on like a little 7-inch as possible. Like doing like 5 songs, some quick songs or something on a 7-inch, and then then you move on to the next thing. So, and I think those are pretty cool too. So
I agree with everything you said. There's something that's so it's romantic of taking a very large object and placing it into another very large object, which physically spins, that I see with a connection between like a real like piece, and then the long form of having to pay attention for an entire record. Like, that is pretty much what you're going to do at that point. You can set a record off and you can go do something, but there is even like a different sound to the record, which actually I feel like, and I don't know if it's the same for everyone, it actually draws me in more than say a CD. I can put a CD on and just listen to it and be done. And an iTunes playlist, I mean, I could ignore an iTunes playlist all day,
sure.
Especially if it changes from song to song,
right.
But one record, I'm definitely on that journey. What are some of the places, like, talk a little bit, let's nerd it up about DC a little bit. What are your favorite places to play, both as a solo artist, and what have you run into as a band? Tell me about some of the great experiences.
Well, I mean, if you're talking venue-wise, I basically started at the Galaxy Hut. So that was probably some of my first shows I ever played with like my high school buddies, and that was forever ago. And and you talked about Alice, and Alice was that was back when she owned the Galaxy Hut, and that was like a really great time for just kind of start out when she owned it. And then so I've always loved to play there. And I think like that's one of my favorite places to play. Black Cat is probably my absolute favorite place to play, just because watching the evolution of that place and how great it's gotten, and moving from now it's in a bigger space and everything. And I feel like they've been like 930 is great. Technically, I love that place too, but Black Cat has just been like the top place to go to for so long, and I'm just so glad it's still there on 14th, because it could not very well not be, because it's surrounded by by
furniture
restaurants
stores.
and right.
There's literally 5 furniture stores on that street, all
Right.
within like 2 blocks of each other. How could there be that much need for furniture? Those places are tiny.
Yeah,
It doesn't make any sense.
It all seems very expensive too, so
Yeah.
I don't really quite understand that. But so I hope the cat can stay there forever. I mean, but because that's just such a great place to play.
That's probably consistently in DC where I've seen the shows that have been the most personal. The backstage, when you're on that stage, that's only like maybe 7 or 8 inches off the ground,
Right.
and you're able to be right face to face with the musicians. It's amazing. How do you feel like? Does the stage ever seem daunting to you as a patron? Does the stage ever seem daunting to you as a performer?
Not really. I mean, it depends on the size of the place. Can sometimes be a little like Galaxy Hut is always. I remember always people being always like, "This place is tiny," and it is. But you don't really ever think about how small it was. I just thought about how fun it was to play there, And so it's yeah. Sometimes that kind of hits you, but the Black Cat, I feel like the same basically when I've played upstairs or downstairs. It's about the same kind of vibe, the same kind of place, all the same people working there, and it's always fun and cool. So, but the backstage, I remember back when they didn't even have a backstage at the first space, sort of, they kind of added that in, and they kind of like split the space in half, and they made a backstage at the earlier spot that they had, and that made things a lot better for locals because they could have a show and be like, look, we don't have to fill this whole room for you, you can have locals come and play like on the weeknights, and we only have to fill like half the room, and it just felt like a lot better, like you didn't have to. There wasn't any like worry about, oh man, we got to play this gigantic space and try and fill this gigantic space up.
In the next segment, you're going to hear Johnny talk. I don't know why I call him John. His name is John, but I think there was at one point he would refer to himself as Johnny Metro, which I think that's such a cool name. You're going to hear John. Bleh, I'm just spitting out things now. I have cards in front of my face. I'm trying to use like this as ridiculous as a script, as lame a script as I possibly can, because I don't want to forget to say all the things that I want to during the segments. In the next segment, you're going to hear John talk about how house shows seem to be popping up a lot more often, and how there's good sides and there's bad sides, mostly good sides to playing house shows, and how it can be fun. I also wanted to mention, if you would like to purchase the EP that we're referring to in this episode, go to Bandcamp, look up Harness Flux, and while you're there, and actually that's the most important thing in this particular episode, support John, because that would be a great way again to show the power of the Pilot Waves podcast, is for John to see an upswing in the purchases on his Bandcamp page. But if you're on Bandcamp, why don't you type in Fat Neil as well? Fat Neil provides us with our musical bed, and we are forever grateful to him for that. And you could show your support and love to him by purchasing his albums on there as well. And we're also going to talk a little bit in this next segment about streaming plays and whether or not John thinks that's a great thing or a bad thing. And again, I wanted to thank Don Zientara for allowing us to conduct this interview at Inner Ear Studio. Thank you so much, Don.
The club scene in DC is weird now, I think, because I think if anything's happened in the last few years, it's been house shows, or if the house show boom is really big. So I'm not sure I don't know what the clubs think of that necessarily, but I don't know how they're really dealing with it. But I think a lot of people in the long run are turning to house shows because it's a lot easier to deal with. Not that clubs are hard to deal with, but it's house shows are, everybody who's there, like the people are pretty laid back. The people are very often very generous with giving you just money, Tour that works better for touring bands too sometimes, so it's definitely like a house boom right now. So I'm not sure what I like doing both, I like doing clubs or houses no matter what, but I think kids respond to houses a little more than clubs these days, or maybe all the time. I don't know, but
so do you remember being a kid going to house shows? Do you remember?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, there was
what was the best one you ever saw?
The famed one here in Arlington, Kansas House.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a bunch of shows there, but I don't remember there being as many as there are now. I think it seems like it's a bigger deal now. It's kind of more of a boom of it. But I remember being on tour thinking those were a lot better because you'd be like an automatic place to like stay. You know, it'd be like when you finish the show, all the kids that live there would just be like, "Why don't you stay here?" Or we'll make dinner or something like that. And you didn't have to worry about like, "Oh, where are we gonna be? You know, where are we gonna go after the club or whatever." So it's just a different vibe. You know.
I totally. I struggle going back and forth on house shows because when you have a great experience at a house show, I feel like it's almost spiritual, you know, because you're all in it and you're all feeling it, and you know, you look around the room and it's really connecting with people. But a bad house show experience, you feel like you're in someone's house that you're not supposed to be there.
Sure.
Everything is real like antsy, and you're not sure what the rules are. Right. You know, maybe one guy has like a beer, and then you're like, well, where's the beer? Right. You know,
or somebody's way too drunk or something, and then that can be weird. And then the sound, you never know about the sound, and so it can definitely be hit or miss with the houses too.
And then you find out the room you're playing in is like this, you know, and like people can only see you from around the corner, you know.
Sure, right.
So I know you said that you don't have any shows coming up, but you have the EP coming out, or I'm sorry, it's already come out. Now, can you give people instructions on how they would go and get that EP?
Oh, well, the best place to get it is Bandcamp, mvharnessflux.bandcamp.com, and then it's other places too.
Where's your preferred? What would you prefer?
Bandcamp would be the best because I get the money directly there. So, but it's also it can also be streamed. I don't know if we want to talk about the streaming when I get into the streaming controversy, but it can be streamed at like Spotify and radio, and it can also be purchased at Amazon, and also basically it's everywhere. But go to Bandcamp if you can. That'd be great. And I mean, I actually have. I mean, it's their CD version of it too. If you want to order that, and I'll send it to you. Send you one of those too. So that'd be great. Bandcamp is
I'm
best.
Sorry, I interrupted you.
Sure.
What was so the streaming controversy? That is something that we do like to talk about from time to time. How do you feel about streaming music?
I mean, I'm for it, but I don't. It's an odd thing because I think a lot of people complain that they're not getting paid enough for it. But in certain ways, that's one of the only places you do get paid. You get paid nothing, but Spotify actually does pay you something, but it's very, very minuscule. I mean, I think I've had $2 or $3 worth of Spotify. That's how much they paid me for. I can't remember how many over the last few years.
7 million plays.
Yeah, well, not
$3.
not quite that many, but yeah, like I mean, and I use it strictly as a kind of a jump off point to like listen. There's just such a barrage of new records, and I use it as a place to be like, okay, then I can sample that record, and when I want to buy it, then I'll buy it. You know, so I think that's a good way because I hear it, I get a piece of it, and if I really like it, I'm going to like pursue it. You know, I just don't know if everybody looks at it that way. You know, maybe some people are like, well, I can listen to it on Spotify forever, and I never have to put a dime into purchasing it. So, and I think that's why it scares people. But I also still think as a place for people to find music, it's a great. I feel like every avenue possible is good. You know, the more avenues there are, the better, as far as I'm concerned. I think if you got rid of Spotify, I think it wouldn't be cool, you know. It wouldn't be good. I think it's good to have it, and they need to rework the model. And you know, SoundCloud is now like having ads in there, and they're trying to pay people and things like that, and that's good. But it's just, you know, it's the nature of music. There's just so much of it made, and it's only so much money to go around with music. So, and people want to act like Spotify's the enemy. I don't think they're the enemy. I think they actually help a lot of people. But it runs the gamut. There's people who have millions and millions of plays on there don't get paid anything, but people who want to be found out can be found out easily there.
You know, maybe they can or maybe they can't. And I think John has a great point, which is that it's not really about the method. It's about, you know, how you utilize it. And it's up to us to support artists that we might be streaming a lot of. And I think that's one way we could all, you know, better support music, is not just stream things constantly, but maybe purchase everything or purchase something once in a while. In the next segment, you're going to hear John talk about writing music specifically to sell to bigger artists and performers. You're going to hear us talk a little bit about whether or not classic songs or older songs were written better than newer modern songs. The concept of like whether or not songs are timeless, and how you can sort of tell when something is timeless when people still attach themselves to it, no matter how they're introduced to it. And then you're going to hear us mention the cranky record store clerk versus automation making recommendations. I wanted to, again, thank a few people. Misha Communications for the continued marketing and social media support. And of course, Inner Ear Studios for allowing us to record this interview there. And while you're at it, go to Indiegogo, type in Heavy Breathing, and then you know what to do after that.
I heard recently something, I think I read on Twitter, that somebody said that there's people that are like musicians, especially like in LA or New York, that all they're doing is writing music in order to sell to a bigger artist, which I think is that's nothing I would ever think about doing. But it's a way of creating, sure. But to think that you're just writing songs in order to like sell it to Beyonce and hope it gets big or something is a strange concept to me, because I'd rather just have that be my song. You know, I mean, if somebody else wanted to cover a song of mine, that'd be fine. But I'm not interested in making something for someone else. But that collaboration certainly can still work, and that's still certainly a way of being creative. But it's just not the way I've ever thought of putting things out. And I think Twitter and a lot of these social networking, you're seeing all sorts of new ways that younger people are trying to find a way to sell their song or get their songs out there, and it's just kind of still a new. It's still the Wild West with all that stuff in a certain way. I mean, kids are coming up with new ways all the time of getting their stuff out there. So
that's a great way to describe it. It is the Wild West. I'm always, so I use YouTube. I'm always looking up like songs, old songs that I remember. As many new songs as there are, like whether it's Lady Gaga, that's a horrible example, but that's just the one we're going to use. The songs that still have the most amount of plays are the classic songs.
Sure.
Why do you think that is?
Just because they were, especially if they were big radio songs, that's how people connected with them, I think, and that's always going to be inherently still the way that most people have been introduced to music, is like radio and stuff like even MTV when it still played music and things like that. So, and in the long run, kids younger people now find out about that stuff because it was a big hit. They found out about it in a different way, but they still always go back to it. And the thing about all that stuff, like thinking about a younger person finding an old song on YouTube like that, it's interesting because and it just goes to show you that a lot of those songs are still really good songs because they're connecting with people in a completely different way. Yet they're going to forever connect with people. If it's a good piece of music. So that's
what. And I was going to ask you a leading question after that. Is the art better? Do you think that do you think that, and we'll just say strictly like radio or popular music, do you think that the music was better written in the old days, like us old timers, or do you think it's different? Do you think there's anything to that?
I'm not sure if it was any better, or I don't know if anything's better or worse now. I just think, it's being packaged and sold in a different way. So, I've always been very like mind boggled by the concept that as soon as somebody buys something online, like something on iTunes, like a record or something like that, within that very second, it's going to tell you another 20 records that you're going to think you like. Which, how long that took back in the years ago when you went to a record store, the only person that was going to tell you what after the record that you bought, were there going to be other ones like it, that was the cranky record store clerk.
Right.
And now you've got an automated system of people being like, oh, if you bought this and buy this, if you bought Sonic Youth, try Pavement or stuff like that. And that's kind of mind-boggling because I had an older brother who was in college and he'd come back and give me records, and I was very fortunate to have him like tell me about really cool new things and stuff. And that was like, I'd miss that, if I was a kid now and be like, oh, well, I bought a Velvet Underground record on iTunes, and it also told me to buy like Jesus and Mary Chain, so I bought that too. But what was fun about that? What's fun about being told exactly what everything else is like? It's just digging around and getting out there and like reading in magazines like it used to be. I don't want to sound old, but it just seems weird to have that stuff just pushed right in front of your face like right away. Now it's just a different way of finding things. But and then like we were saying, it still means that music is definitely timeless because kids are still into it and still always listening to it no matter how they find it. It's just a different way of finding it now. So,
John, I don't want to cut you off. Did you have? I want to give you the last word. Tell Arlington, DC, Virginia, Maryland, the DMV, as I like to call it. Just me. I'm the only one who uses that term. Tell the DMV what it is that you need to keep creating art and what it is that you would like to see more of in this area.
Basically just keep supporting music, especially local music, keep going to shows, and that's all I can really ask for, and just be interested in things, read things about music and just try and support us as much as possible. I mean, I think DC, the toughest part is how, conservative we are here, and everybody's kind of working really hard. So it's tough. It's tough to get out to a show. But if you just go to a show maybe once a month or once every couple of months or a few a year or whatever you can do, that's doing something, And especially try and see somebody. Don't just try and see something that's been written about on the internet or something. Try and see one or two things on the year that some friend of yours has told you about, or your friend is in, or your band is in, or whatever, or your friend of the band your friend is in, and that's that helps everybody immensely if everybody could do a little bit of that. So,
or maybe you could go see a band live that you heard about here on the Pilot Waves podcast and say, hey, I came to see you because I heard about you on the Pilot Waves podcast. That would be a great way to support us and a great way to support art and music in the DMV. You could also go to Bandcamp, type in Harness Flux, find John's new album, purchase it there, and mention in the comments, or if there's somewhere that you can type in something or a little response, mention that you heard about it here on the show. Again, and I just wanted to wrap up, I wanted to thank you, the listener, for listening this far. And I wanted to remind you that it would be lovely to hear from any of you, and this means any of you. Reach out to us on Facebook. Reach out to us on Twitter at PilotWaves, or you can email us at culture@pilotwaves.com. This goes for any of you. Have you heard this episode? Write back to us, give us some feedback, let us know what you thought. Or I would thank you even more if you would go out and support live music, if you would continue to be good to each other, and most importantly, continue to listen to the Pilot Waves podcast and pass this on to your friends. Say, hey, I've been listening to this cool podcast. This guy, Alex, he's been begging me to get him new listeners, and that would be marvelous. So until next time, this is Alex Vidalis on the Pilot Waves podcast, signing off.